This is Protiviti Legal Perspectives.
Welcome to the Protiviti Legal Perspectives podcast series. I'm your host, Chad Volkert, and it's great to be with you today. I'm also a global solution leader here at Protiviti. Couldn't be more excited today than to have Sanghani with us. He's a managing director in the legal consulting practice at Protiviti. Deep industry expertise. Sonny, welcome to the program, and maybe share with our audience a little bit of your background and credentials.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chad, for having me. My name is Sanghani. I'm managing director here with Protiviti. Been with the firm for almost 18 years now. Gosh, that seems like forever in this day and age. I started my career in the internal audit space, and I grew in and around that with business process improvement, reviews, controls, and risks, and then did some work in implementation as well. And that all led me to a few engagements where I started working on investigations. And, one thing left to another. And now I'm here with the legal team at Protiviti, helping our clients, both in-house counsel and outside counsel, execute on engagements where they need assistance.
Well, it's great, Sonny. And I think your background, starting in audit and migrating with that sort of expertise into investigations and then broadly within the legal sphere, has been a tremendous asset to our global clients around the world as well as in the United States. I know you've worked on a number of very sensitive, complex, larger scale investigations, litigations, in and around e-discovery, project management, sensitive data. Maybe share with our listeners a little bit of some of the common challenges your clients have experienced on these matters. And you may even want to throw in a case study or two for our listeners to really grasp the importance of this area.
The typical request that I'm seeing is from counsel saying, hey, I need to go get data. But did you know how that data got generated, or those records were created, or what's happening at the business level? And so we try to travel a little upstream with that to understand what is going on and how those records are being generated, how the data is being reported. And often what we'll find is that there are other components that we need to include to have a better or more robust picture. And this isn't to say that we're always trying to expand the scope. This is more to ensure that we're getting it the first time versus getting it later, because eventually it shows up. In an investigation, you will stumble upon it by review of emails, respondents, referring to something, or in an interview. And at that point, midstream, without, blowing up what has already occurred and having to redo all that work, if we had taken that small step in advance, we pull that content through, and what we're now able to do is look holistically at the information at hand to then respond to or investigate further into an incident. That's the big one. The other components of it, and this is just so we're not spinning our wheels necessarily, is ensuring that some degree of due diligence or upfront proactive measures are being taken to understand how you can get content out of your platforms. Everyone these days are using, everyone has email to some extent, has some version of messaging apps within it, be it Slack, Teams, Google Chat, whatever you want to call it. Those are two large vectors, but then you have all these other structured repositories internal to the organization. Incredibly critical to get content out of, but you don't want to be reinventing or inventing the wheel, I should say, during a incident or an investigation. That's something you should be able to pull from a playbook and then execute on.
Maybe share with us where you're seeing this technology in and around document management, new technology, current technology that companies may have sort of integrated into solutions that you're creating for clients, really to keep costs down and to create additional efficiencies.
Yeah, so many of our clients today are looking at and exploring governance platform on top of their data apparatus. And now what that means for us is that we're being asked to help them understand workflows, understand where their records are being kept, and then the information governance. help them understand what they can get rid of or need to secure and keep for a prolonged period of time. And so, yeah, be it Google, Microsoft, be it a particular platform, Salesforce, whatever it looks like, they all have their different ways of doing this. And what we are doing now is engaging with them to not only just say, hey, here's the required statute or reg compliance feature of it, but working with the business, working with IT, working with legal to get that intersection covered so that we can actually support them through the change management process. Because ultimately, there's the rules, there's the tools, but then you have the people who have to enact all this. And that's really where we're entering into the dialogue and assisting with this. And when I get these call-ins from CTOs or CFOs or the GCs, often it's with a symptom being identified. Hey, I need to get rid of my documents. Well, by getting rid of your documents, maybe you're lowering your litigation profile or you're reducing your cyber risk. But really, what are you trying to do? There are statutes out there that require you to keep things because you are in a particular industry, call it pharma, call it, waste or whatever it might be. There are other statutes out there or other particular components like data privacy that has data minimization pieces coming through. And then it could be in a very litigious sector as well. All that is to say, there are things we have to abide by, and there's things the business needs to run analytics, to be more impactful in their decision making, and also to understand and key client relationships that they may have, or customer relationships that they want available. So we try to marry all this up by not just addressing that one symptom, but drawing it back into the full spectrum of what needs to happen, and that becomes the game plan. That's why, at least I personally have been called back to engage with many of these individuals because we're not just addressing the symptom. I can go in every day, leak file, not to help one necessarily get to the goal, which is probably a more broad, sustainable kind of environment that they're trying to achieve.
It's fascinating because really positioning yourself as that trusted resource to take a look at the broader picture and begin to bring the credentials and the solutioning to the table that the C-suite and executive leadership of a company really need. Maybe I could switch gears slightly away from sort of the litigation and the risk and move more towards some of the work you've done, Sonny, in building teams to help companies with M&A and in particular some large contract migrations. What are the best practices? Because if you're an organization out there, you continue to have paper, you have many, many contracts, NDAs, leases, whatever industry you're in, that's an ongoing and a growing issue. So what type of best practices and sort of consultants are you bringing to the table to level set and be able to maybe even lever up and down resources for a client's need in this area?
Yeah. So the history goes when we used to get these types of engagements, and what we usually were displacing in terms of folks who were trying to work on this was, hey, we have 1,000 documents and we have an Excel work. Can you please fill it? And that filling it out was to, perhaps a resource who understood how to read a document, but not necessarily consume the content. And, as we think about the problem set typically is in and around, we have a bunch of agreements. We don't know where they are, scattered across the organization. We need to centralize them. We need to get data out of them. We also need to do some risk ranking because, something that we signed 10 years ago may not be what we would agree to today based on security requirements. And so best practices kind of part by part, collecting the documents. And so what I tried to encourage is rather than boil the ocean, because who knows where these things are between email and shared drives, is let's look at who we're paying. Typically on the vendor side of this equation or the customer side who we're getting payments from, we know the parties that we're interacting, and we know the parties that we need to be interacting. And so we try to get, from a completeness perspective, a list to work from. And then we started working down the list, and we try to get, from the big ticket items where we can get 90% of it, 80% of it done. We pull that through. We work through triaging the rest. And now this is from our teaming perspective. senior staff level engagement folks who are able to go out and help with this ask, working continuously with the sponsor group at the organization. And from a pairing perspective, that usually means someone within like the paralegal or staff attorney who's really like the spearhead of this, and we're working underneath their kind of main plan. We move now past that into what do we need out of these documents. So we've collected them. Now we take from them what we need. And so there is a couple different facets here. Sometimes it's purely just terms and conditions. We understand our liability, indemnification, warranties, certificates of insurance. Sometimes it's revenue recognition because many of these agreements need to flow into our finance. Whatever that looks like, what we try to construct at that point is the game plan of what that extract needs to be. And it's imperative we do that up front because we're going to find out eventually as we go through these documents is that something's always going to change. But if we start with something at the beginning, we can then deviate from there as required, or document that and move forward. But if we go at it with say, here's the 3 things and we'll figure it out as we go, unfortunately that's going to create this vicious cycle of having to go back to documents to re-look at items. And so that meeting of the minds that happens there is typically with those who've been with the organization, who've been with the finance team, might have been with the business, been with IT. It really, again, trying to pull them across the aisle to get their ideas documented so we know what to do with them. Finally, we get into the extract process. And so today, we're doing a lot of this with the Gen AI tech tools in regards to actually getting content pulled through and then with human validation thereafter. And that validation can happen with things, with folks like contract attorneys that we've been able to deploy at, a de minimis cost relative to outside counsel in the case, who have, the requisite JD or law experience or perhaps a contracts attorney specifically that then help pull through the documents, the layered updates and so forth. And eventually we now turn that into data. So this is all they get to the finish line to get to the data set. And then we have these dialogues in and out, like management platforms, what that means for our clients to actually get one of those onboarded. But at the bare minimum, getting the data, understanding what we need out of it, setting up the construct and getting that extracted out has been the big thing. And those are, I would say, the big ticket items, or at least lessons learned that I've pulled out along the way. Never be the blind leading the blind would be the biggest statement I would say.
No, it's great perspective and shows what sort of multifaceted approach that you're building for your clients. I do recall 2 sort of stories that I'd like to spotlight for you. Number one, you were working with a large financial services client that was going through a merger, and they thought they were bringing you on to remediate about 2,000 different type of agreements. And literally within less than a few hours, you and your team identified a dormant system and discovered over 5,000 agreements that they had no idea were there. So I think getting you involved early in the process and sort of laying out the landscape, and to your point, you don't know where all of these documents are, and even this client didn't, really can help clients stay out of sort of deep water. And then the other example that you shared with me recently is the large entertainment organization that came to us really not able to get through their contract review timely or efficiently, using some high cost type resources. And you built out a co-sourced and an outsourced team where you're doing 99%, or that team is doing 99% of the redlining and drafting before being turned back over to in-house counsel. And so, I love how creative you and the team have been to really tailor your approach to clients. Are there a couple of pieces of advice that you would give in particular to the chief legal officer or general counsel as they're being seen much more frequently as a business partner at the enterprise level versus just the legal department?
Yeah. So I think the first comment I would say is think strategic. right? Be in the dialogue of the decision making versus being a kind of a gatekeeper to make it. And so that is probably paramount in having these communications. And what we've been seeing and what we've been asked, frankly, if we get a request in the record management space, as an example, from, let's call it the business or the IT, my first response is, who from legal is joining you? So my message, perhaps a CLO or GC or AGC, would be get in those conversations and be part of them. And be providing the advice or the guidance or any sort of regulatory updates that you're seeing real time versus reviewing or perhaps waiting for a document. I would also probably say two other things. Leaning into technology today is probably at the top of many folks' lists. What does that mean for those? I would say make sure that you understand the process that you're wanting to deploy into the technology. Don't just say, hey, I'm going to buy this because it's going to solve for Y. If our people don't know how to do it, the technology is not going to start doing it. But leaning into that and getting adoption, moving that forward, creating a process center within the legal department is going to be imperative. And then the last I would say is continuous improvement. It doesn't have to be the same old just because it works. It can be better. And so in trying to get to better, asking for that feedback is imperative because I think we can all improve from there.
It has been a distinct pleasure having you on our podcast series today. Again, thank you all for listening and viewing our podcast today.
Thank you for listening today. Find other episodes of Protiviti Legal Perspectives on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast content. And to learn more about Protiviti's legal consulting services, visit protiviti.com.